Good evening, John Augustine here. I hope I find you well. It was cold enough here today in Oldcastle, and this is Bishop Joseph E. Strickland of Tyler in East Texas. Light, and he has something else, but it's the light of Christ that counts, isn't it? The light of Christ. So here we are, and he's talking about his experiences in the seminary, and he was in what was considered at the time a conservative seminary that would be teaching kind of traditional ways, but there was never any mention of the Latin Rite Mass. And the strange thing is that in Vatican II, it promoted the Latin Rite Mass, that it be kept, but that Mass could be said in other ways. But what it didn't specify, and this is very extraordinary, that prior to Vatican II, the Latin was the universal language of the Catholic faith. And when I was growing up, that's what it was celebrated because of my age. And churches packed and confessions packed. There was no, it wasn't called extraordinary form like it's called now, and that kind of type of language didn't occur. It was the universal language of the Catholic faith, so that you could get Mass everywhere once you had a missal, and we all had missals. No matter how poor we didn't have to be wealthy to have a missal. So you could follow the Mass, and when I was an autumn boy, so, but Father Bishop Joseph E. Strickland, so he heard nothing about it. And more's the pity, isn't it? Because it wasn't done away with in Vatican II, quite the reverse. But also, the Vatican II should have specified quite clearly that the priest should never turn his back on the tabernacle, which should always be in the center of the church. He's not the center of anything. He celebrates Mass, the holy sacrifice of the Mass, and face the tabernacle so that people all face the tabernacle, which they do in the church when you're kneeling in your seats or standing up, as the case might be for some prayers like the Our Father and that type of thing. And when the priest comes into the church, you stand up out of respect. Now, and of course, we all received Holy Communion kneeling at the altar rails, and there was often something on the as you were kneeling that would not be the hard surface of the china that's on most of the altar rails, and then there was linen cloth on the surface of the altar rail, so that you had your fingers under that. So the priest with an altar boy, or that as it was in my time, and you received the Holy Communion on the tongue and a pattern under the chin to protect the sacred host. And reverence was the key word. Bishop Strickland speaks about the reverence, and he he come lately to the practice of the Holy Mass in the Latin rite facing the tabernacle, and he mentioned that people, and silence is a feature as well. You'd better be a prayer life, but people are not used to it, he was saying, and silence is not something that they're able for. They fill silence with noise of one kind or another, and that's not the way to do it. But if they were denied that Latin rite for years, they wouldn't be in tune with it. But as they become in tune with it and are catechized, in other words, the priest takes time to acquaint them with what it is and have missals, or even the church can often supply uh, a small version of a missal that has the main ingredients. It mightn't have the gospel and the the first and the responsorial psalm and the epistle mightn't have that, but it has the other parts like in Latin and like the Credo, the I believe in God and the Pater Noster. But as I say, sermons then would be in English or whatever the language of where the Holy Mass is celebrated. And but the Latin rite was the universal language, so that you get Mass anywhere. Now, Bishop Strickland, being new to it, talks about the extraordinary from it. Those words were in the vernacular when we got up, and there's no point in those words being used. Extraordinary and ordinary and all this sort of language, which is quite irrelevant. It actually confuses to my way of thinking. But when you're lately come to something, you suddenly start using words of that caliber. They're meaningless. It's the Latin rite is the universal language of the Catholic faith and should be celebrated much more widely. And where it is celebrated and people get used to it, they love it because it nourishes the soul. And the receiving Holy Communion, kneeling at the altar, attended by the priest, with a pattern under the chin of the communion, with an altar boy or girl. Now, as girls naturally can be altar girls in that, and they are wearing, the boys are wearing soutane and surplices, and the girls little cloaks, the reverence. And these are all good. And altar rails be put into the churches, as always was. It's kind of very peculiar to see a priest facing the congregation saying Holy Mass. It certainly doesn't seem right to me. And Bishop Strickland would come in lately to it. He wouldn't have the background that some of us have of a certain vintage. And I certainly have when I was about 30. And when it changed, it didn't do it a blind bit of good. A lot of lapsed Catholics started falling away because when you change things too much, that happens. And it happened in the States when Latin was the language of the Catholic faith. So Bishop Strickland is talking about that. So at least he come to the realization with the Holy Spirit, and he then is in trying to encourage his flock and his priests to hasten slowly, as the fellow says, and to explain to the people that the silence is a good thing. Gives you a chance to start trying to save your immortal soul. Noise won't change it. Yap, yap, yap won't change it. Silence. You're in the presence of the Holy of Holies. People don't think of that. I certainly don't think of it because it hasn't been preached, regretfully. But there's always hope that it'll come around. God will allow all these things to test. And we hope and pray that in the Vatican, with this new administration that's there, or new, won't call it that, it's cardinals and all this, and this present Pope, that the Holy Spirit enables him to see the value of the Latin Mass. And I'm surprised that of his age that he wouldn't have been brought up in that marvellous universal way of the Catholic Mass, so that you get it everywhere. Bishop Strickland doesn't come from that point of view. He just in his diocese he wants to do that, and he spreads the word. I heard him in EWTN, which I look at, the Eternal Word Truth Network. It's a good Catholic program, and some of the programs are quite good. Some of them I just look at it in the evening time, and sometimes Mass. It depends on who's saying it. There's some they're Franciscan clergy that say it whom I don't find uplifting for me. I like a good sermon, as the fella says, and some priests do that excellent, and your soul is nourished, and then it stays with you. So I hope to avail of Holy Mass more regularly now with Lent coming next Wednesday. So there we are. That's Bishop Strickland. So we'll be doing a bit more tomorrow about Bishop Strickland, and but with my experience, I can add something to it, and I hope you find it interesting, and that you take time just to the fellas to simmer down and see the good of the Latin Rite Mass, the universal language of the Catholic faith. Yeah, shame that it what he did. Yeah, there's no right to do it. Didn't have the results that they were expecting. Taking the human one, put God center, then you know what to do. Bye now, and I'll be doing hymns and let's talk after that. So stay tuned.